Esteemed panelists, participants, elders, and all who have joined us tonight via Zoom or Facebook, bonjour, assalamu alaikum, welcome. My name is Sean Kazabowski-Houston, and I'm the Events and Media Coordinator for the Center for Religion and its Contexts here at Emmanuel College. And on behalf of the Center, I would like to thank you for joining us this evening for this important conversation, and the fourth in this series I'd like to add, Indigenous and Muslim Perspectives on Peace Education. The Center is honored to be co-sponsoring tonight's talk with Justice for All Canada and the Olive Tree Foundation. The Center for Religion and its Contexts, through academic and continuing education events, shares its distinctive contextual approach to the study of religion in all aspects: theology and belief, historical development, lived experience, and diversity of expressions in the United Church of Canada and in other Christian contexts, as well as in Muslim, Jewish, Buddhist, and other religious understandings. For upcoming events that are sponsored or hosted by the Center, you can find those on our website, and I'm going to share that in the chat here very quickly, while I'm making sure that I admit everybody as well. I don't want anybody missing out. And I just wanted to do some very quick housekeeping. And this, I'll make it short and quick. I just ask that you please ensure that your Zoom name is the name that you use to register for tonight's event. That just ensures that our gathering tonight remains secure and enjoyable for all. If you don't know how to rename yourself, you just hover over your own picture, your thumbnail, click on, you'll see there's 3 dots on your thumbnail as you hover over with your mouse. Click on that and then select edit, rename, and just rename yourself to the name that you registered with. And you can also include your pronouns if you'd like at that point. And I ask that if you're not speaking, please remain on mute. That way that ensures that everybody can enjoy whatever somebody else is saying at any given moment. And something as innocuous as somebody banging a cup onto their desk can actually limit what other people are hearing in this session. So please do remain on mute. I thank you for that, for those considerations. Sorry, my oh, there it is. It disappeared for me for a second there. My apologies. Now I'd like to introduce tonight's moderator, Dr. Katherine Bullock. Dr. Bullock, who earned her PhD from the University of Toronto, is a lecturer about political Islam in the Department of Political Science at the University of Toronto in Mississauga. She is news anchor for Canadian Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Her publications focus on Muslims in Canada, media representations of Muslims and Muslim perspectives on basic income. Professor Bullock is also currently president of Compass Books, dedicated to publishing top quality books about Islam and Muslims in English. She has co-founded and served on the board of several Muslim organizations in Canada, including the Federation of Muslim Women and the Tessellate Institute, a nonprofit research institute. She's been board member and vice president of the North American Association of Islamic and Muslim Studies, and a board member and chair of the Islamic Society of North America and Canada. Dr. Bullock, I'm happy to hand things over to you.
Thank you so much, Sean, for that lovely introduction. And it's really wonderful to be working with you and Emmanuel again for these series that we're doing on Indigenous and Muslim perspectives. We are going to begin with a traditional ceremony delivered by one of our panelists, Bonnie Jane Maracle, who is from the Haudenosaunee Nation. I will introduce her and then turn it over to her to do the traditional greeting. She is from the Wolf Clan of the Mohawk Nation, Tyendinaga territory. I tried to pronounce that properly. I hope I did all right. Bonnie Jane has a Bachelor in Indigenous Studies from Trent University, a B.Ed and M.Ed from Queen's University. That's where I also did my master's degree, so we're fellow alumni. She is a PhD candidate in Indigenous Studies at Trent University. She is presently employed at the University of Toronto as the in-residence traditional teacher at First Nations House, a sessional instructor at Oise CTL, and an online instructor at the University of Victoria, a very busy lady. One thing Bonnie recommends we do every day is set a timer and stand up once an hour and stretch. Perhaps she'll explain later why, but for now I turn it over to you, please, for the traditional greeting. Thank you. Just a reminder, if you could come off mute so we can hear you.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
I was just saying, Sego Zewagwego, Yahodungwas Youngets, Wagata Huni, Tyendinaga Ganagari, Ganyangihaga. Yes, my Mohawk, I'm from Wolf Clan of the Mohawk Nation. My whole Mohawk name is Yahodungwas, and my English name is Bonnie Jane Maracle. And I'm from the Haudenosaunee traditional community, and my community is Tyendinaga. So in our teachings, traditional teachings, we are taught, and our understanding is that whenever we have opportunity to get together, we are to give our greetings and thanksgivings to all those entities of creation that continue to do their job they were commissioned with when they were created and placed on earth. So that entails everything from the plant world, the water world, the four-winged and the animals, and right up into the celestial, the stars and the sun and the moon, all have a role to play. And their role in that, we believe that they were created first before the human beings were created and placed on earth. So the role of the human beings, once placed on earth, was to be caretakers of all of this. That was our role. And we wanted for nothing, because everything that was there to sustain our lives was at our fingertips. And so it is today, even though all those entities like water and air and the grasses and the medicines are still really, really struggling to survive and do the jobs that they were instructed to do when they were created. So that's why, and they collectively sustain the lives of the human beings. So in essence, in today's world, the human beings are destroying themselves. So the idea then is, from a Haudenosaunee perspective, is that we take every opportunity we can to give our greetings and thanksgivings to these entities, kind of reach out and pat them on the back and thank them for what they're doing and continuing to do. The human beings are struggling themselves, but the entities are just facing the same adversities that we are, but also at the hands of man. So with that, basically, we call it the Ohandagari Wadekwa, and that means the words before all else. So whenever we have opportunity to come together, we give our greetings and thanksgiving. So when they hear the voice in our language, because the human beings were created with a diversity of voice, then they know instinctively who is speaking to them. By our voice recognizes, just as if we're listening to people and we can recognize Italian, we can recognize French, those kinds of things. The creation itself recognizes the voice of the human beings. So that's why our indigenous language are so important, because that's how we communicate to creation. So in that, and in the greeting, or actually is our words of thanksgiving to them. As it's as if we put a ladder up against creation and we step out on that, and we look at what is around in front of us, and we go up that ladder and have a look around, and those are the entities we address as we go up, right up until we talk to the creator, thanking the creator. So in essence, that, and really I'm just repeating, we give our greetings and thanksgivings to each of these entities as we go up. So that's a bit of I guess, reflection on what it is I'm saying in our language. So Gunchokwa, Zewada Hunsia Scotnigari Wesa, Neagari that Sidawa Nuarada Nesangwat Dizon, Newahi Rosa Anyu, Aguego Gina Hoda de Odawari Nechi Hujadi, De Tinarada ne Ungwe Suha, De Tinarada ne Yeti Nesta Ohunja, De Tinarada ne Onega Suha, De Tinoradane Gunjon Sua, De Tinoradane Ohunde Sua, De Tinoradane Odera Sua, De Tinoradane Onunqua Sua, De Tinoradane Gakwa Sua, De Tinoradane Gahi Sua, De Tinoradane Ojinoa Sua, De Tinoradane Granda Sua and an Ogre Sua. De Tinoradane Gundirio, De Tinoradane Ojidan Ogua, De Tinoradane Gayeri Nigawarage, De Tinoradane Yeti Sotogun Radiveras, De Siduanu Waradane Sungwat Gia Anjeka Neka Garakwa, De Tinoradane Yeti Sota Asataneka Garakwa, De Tinoradane Oji Stokwa Suma, that Sidawa Nuaradane Sungwayat Dizon. Ona Tukni Orwagatari Watguene, To Nuanage. Nyawa, so, and that's all my words, which I share to all those entities of creation on everybody's behalf here at this meeting. And with that, we understand that their ears are picked up and their attention is and energies are put towards our thoughts and words and our intent for our meetings, and it adds their strength to it while we're gathered together. So thank you very much.
That was so beautiful. I could feel the rhythm and the poetry of what you were saying, even though I didn't understand the words, and the image of climbing up the ladder to talk to the creator. How beautiful. It's a way for human beings to remember their place in the world, not as kings, but as subjects. And certainly right now with the earthquake victims in Syria and Turkey, there are a lot of people who are being reminded of human beings' lack of control over their circumstances. And a lot of people are suffering, and our hearts and prayers go out to those and anyone who on any place in this world is struggling. We hope that they are enriched and strengthened to do what is good for themselves and their family. I would now like to call on one of our sponsors, Naeem Siddiqui from the Olive Tree Foundation. He is the Vice Chair of the Olive Tree Foundation by night is a volunteer, and by day a credit risk management advisor, advice I think we probably all need on. Please, Brother Naeem, over to you.
Assalamu alaikum. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity thank you for inviting us to this and the opportunity to sponsor this event. This falls very much under the Olive Tree Foundation's activities for this year. Olive Tree Foundation is a waqf, it's an endowment fund. So we help Canadians set up named endowment funds for their families, for their causes. For example, the proceeds of those endowment funds are used to fund exactly activities like this. Our priorities for funding for this year and the last couple of years have been youth climate change, as well as Indigenous issues. So we're very happy to sponsor this. I hope you have a wonderful evening. Thank you to all the speakers for sharing your wisdom with all of us. And I have to do this, if any of you is interested in setting up an endowment fund for your family in memory of someone, or for a cause that you're passionate about, do get in touch with us. I hope you have a wonderful evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brother Naeem, and I certainly echo that call. Philanthropic endowments provided a much needed source of money for organizations. So I really encourage people to support what you're doing, and thank you for your sponsorship tonight. I now like to invite a word from our next sponsor, Taha Rayur from Justice for All Canada. He is a human rights advocate, a personal growth and leadership trainer, and a writer based in Toronto, Ontario. He is driven by a spirit of service and desire to elevate people's potential. He has been leading groundbreaking and impactful community initiatives and campaigns for over 20 years across North America. Since 2019, as the Executive Director of Justice for All Canada, a human rights organization advocating for global Indigenous minorities who are facing persecution and genocide. Brother Taha.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum and good evening. Thank you, Bonnie, for those very beautiful words and words of inspiration that definitely I needed to hear, and I think we all need to. Speaking of Thanksgiving, I wanted to make sure that I recognize and thank, of course, all the wonderful people behind the scenes or on camera as well, especially who have been so instrumental in putting this together. So the wonderful Emmanuel team, Sean, and of course, Dr. Reda and Dr. Kim Craig, as well as, of course, Dr. Kathy, for your leadership. Thank you for bringing us all together for this beautiful evening. And of course, our esteemed presenters, whom we are all here to eagerly waiting to hear today. Justice for All Canada, as you have heard, is a human rights advocacy organization that focuses on minorities that are being persecuted around the world, facing genocide. And our work started about 10 years ago with the work on Rohingya genocide. And since then, we have been working on many minorities. About 2 years ago, it was really a wake-up call for our team when we, sadly, in the aftermath of many mass discoveries of mass graves of so many children that we have witnessed over the last 3 years of residential schools over the last several decades, in fact. It was really in that aftermath that our team realized that we need to do more, and we cannot be talking about justice. We cannot be talking global justice. We cannot be talking about peace, as we were talking about today, without recognizing and talking about and advocating for all those people who are still suffering because of ongoing genocidal policies that impact Indigenous peoples in this land. And this is why we are here today to simply talk about Muslim and Indigenous perspectives on peace education. So thank you once again for bringing us together. Appreciate it, and looking forward to an insightful conversation this evening.
Thank you, Brother Taha, for those encouraging words. And we recognize that the work you do lays a heavy burden on you, always trying to advocate for those who are facing genocide. So we commend you and wish you well and strength in your words and in your voice in trying to help those who need help. So thank you for the work that you do and for sponsoring us tonight. It is now my honor to introduce the principal of Emmanuel College, who is the sponsor, the host of tonight's event, the Reverend Dr. Hiran Kim Craig, our first event with you. We're very honored to have you. Principal of Emmanuel College, Timothy Eaton Memorial Church, Professor of Preaching, committed to interdisciplinary approach to homiletics in practical theology. Her teaching and research address various topics addressed to biblical interpretation, post-colonial theory, feminist homiletics, liturgy, migration, and decolonizing practices. Her current research is involved in intercultural preaching as this intersects with race, gender, and multiple identities of the preacher and the congregations. On the Emmanuel website, Dr. Hyran says, we live in a critical time when different faiths are living in ever closer proximity to one another. The challenge of finding ways to thrive together and care for our planet is pressing. At Emmanuel, encounters with others will serve as a mirror that can help you reflect on your own religious traditions, practices, and questions. We're very grateful for you to be here. Please, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Bullock. And this is such an honor and delight to welcome you to this event today, all of you. I'm so grateful to many of you as speakers, organizers, sponsors, and participants. Since the Center for Religion and its Context has launched, we have hosted many events at Emmanuel, but not many events have taken place as a series. This one, however, is the one that has been running the longest. So that really shows the interest and commitment and kind of success for this important topic. And it is also so important that event is directly related to our own mission and vision. Emmanuel College strives to be a leading theological school where students become more deeply rooted in their own religious or spiritual traditions, while engaging the beliefs and practices of people of other traditions. In this vision, I hope you can conjure up an image of a tree, a healthy, nurturing tree that has roots going deep down into the ground, which help those who come to the tree to be grounded. I hope you can also see that the tree has wide branches stretching out to connect with other trees, helping birds to sit and sing, providing humans to shade and a space for us to meditate. I come from Korea. My first language is actually Korean. Korean language is hybrid because we use Chinese letters as well as Korean in our vocabulary. And one such word is 안녕. It means peace and safety in Chinese meaning. We greet each other with this word. It's like our hi or how are you in English. Many Koreans just say this without even thinking about the meanings, but it is embodied and performed in everyday life. So this event's topic, perspectives on peace education from Indigenous and Muslim perspectives, are so much a good reminder for me of this very important Korean greeting. How can we embody peace in our daily life? How can education have a role in practicing peace, making peace, so that our action can be intentional and deliberate, and our learning can be transformative beyond imparting knowledge, even if that is also important. So with that, I thank you again for this opportunity to welcome you, and I look so much forward to learning with you tonight.
Thank you so much. As someone like myself who watches K-drama and hears Annyeong all the time, I'm very glad to know that deeper meaning. It's a wonderful, very close to the salams that Muslims and Jews also shalom give in greeting. Wonderful. Thank you for telling us about that. With our hosts having had their word of welcome and our traditional greeting done, I would now like to begin the panel part of the evening. I would like to invite Bonnie Jane to come and deliver some opening remarks.
Hi, well, Sego, hello, and thank you thank you for inviting me for tonight. I'll speak on your panel, but yeah, I'd like to follow up what the principal was just saying. That idea of we tend to say "Sego Skunagoa," which basically translates to "Are you at peace?"
Mm,
And that is
yes,
our initial greeting to each other when the Sego is hello part of it, but Skunagoa means "Are you at peace?"
yeah,
So initially, that's very interesting that you shared that with
indeed,
us, because
indeed.
that's kind of like tends to be the way we do things as well, worrying about maintaining that peace. The idea with the Haudenosaunee, and Haudenosaunee in itself is translated as people of the Longhouse. So the people of the Longhouse consisted of actually 6 nations of people. And we're all deemed to be Haudenosaunee because that was our mode of living in longhouses at that time. And each clan of our nation, within our nations, of which we had 3 clans. So in every community of a Haudenosaunee community, there were 3 separate collections of longhouses per clan. So, and I guess I would tend to say the tenets of the Haudenosaunee, which were termed to be Haudenosaunee, but were also, I guess, classified as Iroquois Confederacy, also known as the Iroquois Confederacy, which is a confederacy of 6 nations that lived in peace for well over 2,000 years before contact. So we had already set ourselves up as a confederacy, unified confederacy, where everything was based, and the 3 pillars basically of being a good person, more or less, was based upon peace, being peaceful, having strength, and a good mind, carrying a good mind. So those were the 3 foundational tenets of being a good person. So they were, Skana, Ganat Stansara, and Gatni Gorio, good mind. So the idea of peace was of the utmost, to have most respect for the other person, and respect for creation around us, of which the human being was part and parcel of that creation. So that was the utmost respect and protection of each other. So it wasn't about individualism, it was more of the collective. I didn't have to worry about myself because there was so many more people that was looking out for my welfare. It was up to me, and I'm responsible to look after their welfare in the process. So that peace was maintained amongst 6 nations of people for that length of time, until, of course, we met with the immigrating explorers that were landing on the shores of Turtle Island, North America. So those I guess those pillars are those tenets, the foundations of the Haudenosaunee way of life that still exists today for the traditional people, trying to stay within that. Also, too, at the beginning of our time together as a confederacy was the founding of a constitution. We have a constitution, which is called the Guyana Goa. And this translates to the great law of peace. So within our constitution is laid out for us all kind of like all of the guidelines within which our communities operate, the governance, the clan system, how that was set up, everything is on, and all those I say like those foundations are operative in all of those settings, irregardless. We carry that, irregardless of whether we're sitting in council and doing, the politics of it or the economics of it in trade, our homes, everything. These all emanate from those foundational beliefs of how to be a good person. And it is also interesting that you talk about the symbolism of the tree, because our symbol is the white pine, which is also the tree that symbolizes our story of how our Confederacy came about and how things are to operate, branching out on their own, but still being part of one with the roots in Mother Earth. There's 4 main roots which stretch out into the east, south, north, and west directions, so that other peoples can follow those roots and still be part of, still be part of this Guyana-Agoa if you abide by living with these tenets. And plus, you're under the protection of 5 nations of people. So that's kind of how things operated. So the idea of peace within our Guyana-Agoa, the Great Law says that if there is any kind of disturbance between one person and another person, then it's our responsibility, or then therein lies that strength part of it. We have to muster up that strength to step forward and deal with that unrest as soon as possible, so that we don't disturb the peace of other people around us. So we have to have that conviction. So the strength part of it isn't a physical strength or a power, a fighting strength. It's the idea of a strength of conviction, strength of responsibility to step up and acquire peace, so that we don't disturb other people with, say, you and I, if we're arguing about something or we have a disagreement, that's our responsibility, sit down. So we also have to have that strength to say, I was wrong, or, I'm willing to work this out. So in the heat of everything, we have that overriding strength. But also too, that idea of a good mind is that we choose our words wisely, the way we do things, so as not to offend or disturb the peace of other people around us. So that's kind of like gossiping and backstabbing people, or talking about people. Those are not products of a good mind. So we live with peace, strength, and that good mind on that. So that's kind of those pillars for the Haudenosaunee, and comparable to that, I guess, with the Anishinaabe would be their 7 grandfathers. So they have 7 points or 7 factors that they live by to be a good person. And other nations would follow suit with what their dictates or their teachings are. So, but our teachings were pretty much upheld by, I guess, just sitting around and talking about these things. Lots of times they would be carried through by our stories. Our stories, our traditional stories all have meaning and lessons within them. So they're repeated. Our stories have been repeated and passed down over time of the stories, but they're teachings of, how to get along and how to not only with each other, but with the respect that's we're to pass on to creation. So those are the kinds of things I think I wanted to share with members of the panel about just some aspects of the Haudenosaunee way of life. and we don't necessarily call it a religion. It's not a religion. It's a way of life. So that's why I say this foundational tenets operate in everything, wherever we are and whatever we're doing. We have to remember to be a good person with that. And I know the Haudenosaunee traditionally were one of the fiercest fighters on Turtle Island. So we always hear about that side of it as well. But our warriors at that time, because they were sworn to peace, they were tasked with bringing about peace as quickly as possible, so as not for the other nation or the warring, so others don't suffer, prolonged suffering in that. So if they can bring about peace as quickly as possible, then that's how they would do it. So so as a result, they were fierce in their tactics to bring about peace as quickly as possible. So I guess that's kind of like the other side of the coin of history, of what has been put down in history as being those fierce and bloodthirsty savages that were depicted in the history. But there's reason for it. And they were still getting back to the idea of the peace, strength, and the good mind of being a good people. So I think I will just leave it at that. And I look forward to hearing other people and what they've got to share from their perspectives. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Bonnie. We'll have a chance in the moderated question and answer session to come back if there are things that people want to ask from you or you have more to share. So this won't be the last time that we're hearing from you. And I'm sure as you were talking, a lot of people just felt that you said things that resonated in the Jewish tradition, in the Muslim tradition, in the Christian tradition, in other traditions. So there's a kind of universal truth that's been embedded across all the different ways of life. And when we learn from each other like this, it resonates with us and it helps us understand what can bring us together, but also what might be different between us.
Yeah, very good. Thank you.
Thank you. So now I would like to introduce our next speaker. Our next speaker, this panel is all from her, bouncing ideas off me. So I'd like to give credit where credit is due. Fatima Ahmed is studying, hopefully for her master's degree at Lakehead University, how Muslim and Indigenous or Inuit people teach for peace. She's hoping to get her thesis examined in the summer of 2023. She spent 2 years teaching in Kangasuk, which is one of the 14 Inuit villages that make up Nunavik. Her undergraduate degree was in peace and conflict studies, and she has worked in the Canadian Arctic, in Southern Africa, the South Pacific, and in rural areas in Canada and the US. She contacted me a couple of years ago asking for me to help her find people she could interview for her thesis. And when she explained to me what her topic was, I was so enthralled and so convinced that Emmanuel would take it on as our next topic in our series. And of course they did, because they're wonderful people. So we would like to invite now you, Fatima, to explain to us your thesis and what you've discovered in your research so far.
Thank you, Dr. Bullock. Assalamu alaikum, bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So I started with greetings of peace and starting in the name of God, the Creator, Allah. And the suggestion is that the two greatest callings we have as human beings is to acknowledge the Creator and to call to peace. Thank you so much for the invitation. When I was trying to think about what exactly I needed to dedicate the next 12 minutes of the talk to, I had two options. One option was to share stories from up north. And the other option was to provide a theoretical basis of what the thesis is. And I thought maybe it would be better to leave the stories for if there was an opportunity during the question and answer session to share those anecdotes then, but to share the next 11 minutes to share why I think looking at commonalities between Indigenous and Islamic peacemaking traditions or peacekeeping traditions is a valuable topic. So I will, whenever we read Indigenous scholars, they will always tell us that it's really important to examine one's motive for why we're engaging in a study. The same lesson we always derive when we're studying with traditional teachers in Islam. They will always tell us that actions are by intentions. So up front, I will share what my intention is in engaging with this topic. Then I will share what my thesis statement is and the primary and secondary questions that I examined. Then I will talk a little bit about what revealed knowledge is, and talk a little bit about the methodology that I adopted for the research, and then present a few conclusions. So it's, I hope I can fit that in the next 10, 11 minutes. So one of the most well-known sayings of the Prophet, which is also known as the Hadith, is the idea that knowledge is the lost property of a believer. And when we study with teachers traditionally, they'll always tell us that this knowledge is not limited to Islamic knowledge. This knowledge is not limited to knowledge that is part of Muslim majority communities. Rather, we are supposed to learn from whoever we interact with. In fact, seeking knowledge from others becomes incumbent on anyone seeking to increase in their faith. So the goal of this research was to use the 2 years that I had up north to learn from Inuit knowledge keepers and to learn about Inuit peacemaking traditions. And so by learning about those teachings that have survived, 2,000, 4,000, tens of thousands of years, I intended to relate these teachings to my own Islamic teachings. It's a really big honor to be speaking on a panel with Dr. Abu-Nimer, because he was one of the initial people that I read when I was researching peace and Islam. And in fact, I had quoted him in my thesis. In one of his writings, he talks about how in order to shift the emphasis from war to peace in the study of Islamic religion, we need to contribute to further understanding. So he had actually 6 guiding principles. He wrote about 6 guiding principles. And the second part of this was to contribute to furthering the understanding between various groups. And so as somebody who was fortunate enough to be a guest in an Inuit village, I thought that it was only fitting that I try to increase the knowledge and try to increase the understanding between 2 different groups that might not have had much interaction in the past. So those are my intentions for engaging in this topic. In terms of the thesis statement goes as follows. I acknowledge that cognitive imperialism exists against and within Indigenous populations. It is this cognitive imperialism that discounts revealed knowledges as a legitimate source of knowledge. I argue that both Islamic and Inuit knowledges are based on revealed knowledges, and that within this knowledge are principles of peacekeeping and peacemaking. The first principle of peacemaking within both these traditions is self-temperance, temperance, or starting peace with oneself. So the questions that I used for my interview tool fell into the following. The primary question I was investigating was, are there any commonalities in how oral Inuit traditions and oral Islamic traditions teach for peace? And the 4 secondary questions that I asked were as follows. What is peace? How do you maintain peace culturally? What are some stories you can tell us about peace? And how can we teach and practice peace within public and private schools in spite of the deeply embedded cultural colonialism present within these systems? So because the thesis specifically talks about revealed knowledges as the commonality between Indigenous or Inuit and Islamic belief systems and as the core of how we call to peace, I thought that I would quote Dr. Nasser in talking about what revealed knowledges is and how I define revealed knowledges in this context. So Dr. Nasser writes about divine law that since Christianity did not propose religious law, unlike Judaism and Islam, and I quote, religious law in the West developed and is perceived in a very different manner than it did in Islam. For example, he writes that divine law is communicated to us through revealed knowledges, and the author defines revealed knowledges as teachings that reach humanity through revelation, which means the direct conveying of a message from heaven. He goes on to clarify that there are 3 grand revelations and elaborates that these are the following: the cosmos, the human state, and the religions. So there is first of all the cosmic book to be read in December. Then there is the inner book of the soul, which we carry within ourselves. And finally, there are sacred scriptures, which are key for reading the other 2 books, that of the cosmos and that of the soul. So the last quote is how I define revealed knowledges moving forward. knowledges that are known intuitively through revelation from the creator to the soul of the human and non-human creation. And this intuitive knowledge can be harvested through the practice of what we in the Islamic tradition call tafakkur, where this word is defined as an act of thinking, contemplating, reflecting, and training. There is a chapter from the Quran that I would, if somebody was interested in talking about or learning about how the sacred scripture calls to reflection of the cosmos, it's the 78th chapter and it's titled The Great News. Thus, I suggest that it is important to study commonalities between Indigenous and Islamic peace-building traditions because Islamic traditions have access to the book of sacred scripture, while the various Indigenous traditions have immense and established access to the revelation related to the cosmos and the human state. Thus, all three forms of revelation complement each other and can help us reach and practice a more nuanced understanding of peace. So this idea that knowledge is revealed is not just unique to the Islamic tradition. There are many Indigenous scholars that will write about this. So for example, Lavally states that traditional teachings encompass knowledge that has been passed down through generations. Knowledge acquired through revelation, such as dreams, visions, and intuition, is sometimes regarded as spiritual knowledge, which is understood as coming from the spirit world and the ancestors. So I will use this to talk about, for example, and I know Elder Maracle spoke about this just now, about the power of spoken word. So an example of revealed knowledges and the power of spoken word is, in the Islamic tradition, we have a hadith that says that if you experience heavy winds, the Prophet, and this is translated from Arabic, the hadith goes, or the saying of the Prophet goes, the wind is from the mercy of Allah. It brings mercy and brings punishment. When you see it, do not curse it. Ask Allah for its good and seek refuge in its evil refuge in Allah for its evil. So this idea that there is power to the spoken word is also something that I came across in my literature review and my readings by Indigenous authors. For example, Archibald quotes Elder Lee Maracle, and Elder Lee Maracle says the following words: "We regard words as coming from original being, a sacred spiritual being. The orator is coming from a place of prayer. Words are not objects to be wasted. They represent the accumulated knowledge, cultural values, and the vision of an entire people or peoples. We believe the proof of a thing or idea is in the doing. Doing requires some sort of social interaction, and thus story is the most persuasive and sensible way to present the accumulated thoughts and values of a people." So Elder Bonnie did speak about the value of story as well when she was presenting. And so this is, in terms of the methodology that I adopted, I had wanted, since I was doing research in an Indigenous community, I had wanted to adopt an Indigenous methodology. And so the reason for the importance of an Indigenous methodology is that the research, and Wilson states, research methodology needs to incorporate the cosmology, worldview, epistemology, and ethical beliefs of an Indigenous people into the research process. In fact, another author goes on to say, Johnson says, that there is a spiritual dimension that is incorporated in Indigenous studies, and for a scholar to experience this embodiment requires them to change the very essence of how they view and perceive the world. She continues to say that methodologies are based on Indigenous knowledge that is derived from the spirit, heart, mind, and body, where intuitive knowledge and metaphysical and unconscious realms are possible channels to knowing. So this goes back to the value of recognizing revealed knowledge as a valid form of knowledge, and not allowing cognitive imperialism to tell us that just because something is revealed that we cannot count on it as a valuable source and a valid source of knowledge. So the methodology that I specifically adopted was the story work methodology. And story work methodology exemplifies Joanne Archibald, the person who writes extensively about story work methodology, says, and I quote, story work exemplifies what research should do. Enable people to sit together and talk meaningfully about how their Indigenous knowledge could be effectively used for education and for living a good life, and to think about possibilities for overcoming problems experienced in this community. So really the answer, the goal of this thesis then was to start a conversation about what a certain story means to me, or to the research participants, or to the reader, but also recognizing that the stories that we hear today, in a few years when we return, or in a few months, or maybe even in a few weeks, we will find that the meaning and the purpose of that story that was shared through the story work research process has transformed. And that essentially is at the core of story work methodology. I know I'm running out of time, so I will speak about the conclusion. Archibald also quotes Elder George Pulitzer, and he says, we as a nation possess many admirable qualities. We still have enough patience. We still listen before we utter. There are yet among us admirable teachers endowed with empathy and compassion. Among other qualities, your people as a whole possess a voice that soothes and calms the whole being. My thesis supervisor writes in his dissertation, Professor Cormier, my experience with Aboriginal peoples is that living peacefully in balance, harmony, and beauty is an integral component of our worldview, and that of many, if not all, Indigenous peoples around the world. And this is something, in terms of my conclusion, having lived in an Indigenous community or an Inuit community for 2 years, this is something that I repeatedly saw, that things, principles that we are taught in Islamic texts, for example, how to control the tongue. I know Elder Bonnie spoke about gossiping or talking about others is not what a healthy heart does. We know in the Islamic tradition that there is a huge emphasis on using the tongue, recognizing that the tongue is a limb and using it for appropriate means. And so there are a lot of commonalities between how Inuit communities will practice on a daily basis coexistence and to remain harmonious, and the Islamic teachings that we are taught through books and through our traditional teachers. Just to end off, I will quote a scholar, a prolific writer of peace and Islam, who's just passed away 2 years ago. Maulana Wahid Khan says, the greatest strength of peace is that it allows nature to work. If you want to achieve your goal through war, then you yourself shall have to fight. Peace, on the other hand, works on its own. If you stop war, peace will prevail. In such a situation, nature starts to have an instant effect. The only condition is that when nature is at work, one must not interfere. Peace works only in an environment of non-interference. When there is interference, the process of nature comes to a halt. Just as after the seed is sown, the tree starts to grow on its own, this is also the greatest strength of peace. Those who understand this inherent power of peace are never confronted by failure. And lastly, just in conclusion, Wilson, who's an Indigenous scholar, writes in his dissertation that if research doesn't change you as a person, then you aren't doing it right. We know the same concept is taught to us in Islamic studies when we were taught that the only beneficial knowledge that exists is knowledge that transforms you internally. And so I end with that conclusion about the whole.
What happened? Did I freeze or did she freeze?
I think Fatima froze there.
Oh, luckily she was on the word in conclusion.
Yes.
Well, I'm sure you all know immediately why when she explained her thesis to me, I was very excited and wanted to organize a panel to give light to it and to bring other voices in. Fatima, are you there? Can you hear us, Fatima? You've been frozen. We will come back to Fatima, hopefully. But as I was saying, I'm sure that when you heard her speak, you were all understanding immediately why I wanted to grasp onto it, and her way of explaining what she had learned as a Muslim growing up and how she saw it in the Inuit people that she was living and working with, and how important that is. I'm sure and hope that we will all be transformed by our experience tonight. And we thank you for being one of our panelists. We'll come back to you at the end. Now it's my pleasure and honor to introduce Dr. Mohammed Abu-Nimer, who is a professor at the School of International Service at the American University in Washington, D.C. He has conducted interreligious conflict resolution training and interfaith dialogue workshops in conflict areas around the world, such as Egypt, Northern Ireland, the Philippines, Mindanao, Israel, Palestine, Chad, Nigeria, and Sri Lanka. Now, when I first started teaching Islamic politics in 2003, the horrors of 9/11 were uppermost in all our minds, and it was a very difficult course to begin teaching. I wanted to share with the students that there were alternative views on Islam and violence that the attackers had disregarded in their actions of 9/11. And I was very grateful to discover Dr. Mohammed Abu-Nimer's book, which was called Nonviolence and Peace Building in Islamic Context, Bridging Ideals and Reality. I constructed a lecture based on this book and I used it for the next 18 years. So I'm very honored to have you with us tonight. Thank you very much for joining us. Over to you.
Assalamu alaikum, good evening, and peace be upon you and with you all. I am both honored and delighted to be with you. Such a wonderful gathering here we have. It is indeed a sacred space, I think, and it's been in many ways blessed by Bani, if you allow me to use your first name, blessing and the prayer, and taking us way back and beyond the culture of violence that in many ways culture of violence and structure of violence in many ways that Fatima identified in her research as a common ground for many of the Muslim and indigenous people experiences. The impact and the effect of structural violence in all its form, whether it is in the colonial system or post-colonial arrangements, have in many ways have had devastating impact on the social and cultural fabrics of many of the Muslim societies, as obviously on the indigenous people, whether it is in New Zealand, Australia, the US, Canada, Latin America, you name it, and Africa in particular as well. It's all over the world. You can find testimonies of the devastation that these structures of violence have produced in many parts of the world. And I am both honored to hear and also listen to the voice of hope that came through the pillars of peace and the image of the tree of faith that Wani described in indigenous tradition, and also the diversity of the three tribes and the three houses, as well as what Fatima managed to immerse herself into this relationship. And it is a pioneer research because there are very few researchers that have explored the relationship between Muslim peace making and Muslim values of tolerance and peaceful living in context and connection of indigenous people. That's such a wonderful idea to explore. And I think it has many implications, practical implications. So allow me to, again, maybe build on that, but also take you to a different corner of the world. And the 10 minutes or so that I want to speak and share with you, if you allow me less theology and more of a practical application of how can we do peace building and peace education in particular in Muslim context. I am going to go straight through it, hoping that in the Q&A we'll be able to look at some of the other areas of commonalities between indigenous and Muslim peace education approaches. Please let me know if you can see also my screen here. Is it clear?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yes.
thank you. What we have in Muslim peace education as a field or a concept, the basics, and I'm not going to go into very deep or also neither theology or academics or theory, but basically when Muslims educate for peace, they look at the Holy Quran, of course, and the Hadith, which is the Prophet's sayings, and the seerah of the Prophet, his life, his practice, his actions, and the events that went in his life, and also the fourth resources, Islamic, historical, and cultural tradition throughout the 14 or 1500 years Islamic civilization. These are the primary fourth sources that people rely on them, and I think they're very important in attaching them to the framework for peace education. Who can do, who are the, in many ways, the agencies, and the agencies in my mind are religious and also non-religious socialization agents. You don't have to be religious to work on Muslim peace education, and you can be non-religious, secular, whatever identity you want to take. The fact that you are a socialization agent, you are able to convey and present Muslim peace education. So in Canada, in the US, in the Northern Hemisphere, there is no the excuse the religious or faith identity of the teacher should not prevent people from introducing that in the school here in the North. Should not be confined to Muslim schools or religious schools. The elders and younger generation, many times the assumption that elders are the one who educate for peace from a Muslim perspective, and I don't think this is both right or accurate. Younger teachers, younger generation can also be socialization agent for education for peace. Islamic peace education as a framework, it incorporates, like any other framework of education, values that promote peace that are intrinsic in Islam. And Islam here, as I said, the four sources. And it's not a surprise today, after being 30 years in this field of research and practice, it's delight and happy to see so many examples of Quranic as well as social sciences and anthropology and linguistic text, as well as research that looks at the Quranic excerpts or sources in pluralism and interreligious dialogue. But again, the traditional teaching of Quran and the religion is, of course, in the madrasa, and that will be the case that I will share with you today. The classic traditional teaching of peace and teaching of faith that I have worked with it for the past 14 years or 15 years since the first time I began working with Quranic school teachers in different parts of the world. But the way we've defined Islamic peace education, framework of peace education defined by the assumption that the primary message of Islam is peace, and there is no need to dwell on this more. The term Islam and Salam is peace in itself. Muslim says peace, use the term peace during their prayer 5 times, 5 prayers during the day, and they use it as the greeting, and they greet many people during the day with Assalamu alaikum. So peace is an integral part of way of life, as Bani described the tradition, the indigenous tradition as well. Peace, that certain sets of value and belief should constitute the foundation for engaging youth and adults. What are these values? Sacredness of a human life, that's a core value in Islam. Adala, or justice, equality or musawa, rahma, mercy, musamaha in terms of the Quranic verse, forgiveness, doing good or good deeds, amal al-khair, and also to have solidarity, to have compassion with the people, not only within the Muslim Ummah, but also in the human Ummah, if one can use that term these days. Within this framework of Islamic peace education, there is an emphasis on the need to recognize the fundamental principle of pluralism and diversity, which is ikhtilaf in many ways, fundamental principle in Islamic tradition as well. Peace education, according to Islamic framework, has the theological foundation to educate the person to observe the above values and adopt rituals that aim at to preserve such values and belief. The above belief, set of belief and principle have a very strong grounding in Islam, Islamic theology as well. I hope this will not give me trouble. So, I mean, the argument that Fatima and myself and many others for the past 30 some years, and this is what most Muslims speak about also during their every Friday prayer, it's a religion of peace, and the challenge, as I'm sure, you know, if you looked at the book of 2003 that earlier was mentioned here and used, it tackled this issue of what prevent Muslim, what challenge them in introducing peace education in the Muslim context. And this is where I want to focus my work, not in trying to convince you that Islam is peace or that peace education exists in Islam. I think Fatima did that, and also that's a given, and anyone can get that from number of sources available already. So the challenge is that there is this notion Western education is superior to any form of local education, and to overcome that is a trouble. So peace education from a secular perspective is supposed to be more, not only more funded, but also superior. Islam is being conveyed as a religion of war. As I think you mentioned 9/11 and the issue of terrorism, and Islam has become so ingrained as well. The lack of basic infrastructure for education in the 57 Muslim countries, societies. And you can see the statistics from the UN yourself to see how the gap in terms of infrastructures for education. The lack of capacity for teachers in peace education, certification, professional development. Number 5, the wider society environment is itself saturated with agencies that caught in political violence. Needless to say, you know, out of the 21 Arab countries, there are at least 12 of them caught into war, and within the 57 Muslim countries, many of them are caught into political violence or sectarian or tribal form of violence. Having such environment in context makes it very challenging to introduce peace education. It becomes a luxury. It becomes easily to dismiss by children or by younger generation. Scarce public space to exercise the basic fundamental rights of citizenship. When the country, the society, the system itself does not provide a space to exercise the right for citizenship, it becomes more challenging to bring the concept of peace education into the place. Those are the primary challenges that we deal with them every time we try to introduce this in the Arab region, in the Muslim region, also in many ways in Northern Hemisphere, because of the Islamophobia and because of the characterization of terrorism of Islam and other aspects of status related to Muslim communities in the Northern Hemisphere. I will, you know, I've worked with in Niger in Quranic school that are very little experience with with the basic resources. They don't really exist in many ways. The introduction of a new subject become very difficult in such schools. The level of corruption and disruption of long-standing of tradition, Quran, Hadith, Sirah, Fiqh, is also challenge even to introduce it. There is an exclusive and sense of sectarian promotion for certain interpretation. You know, the interpretation of more rigid Islamic views about the world that has emerged and in many ways saturated Boko Haram, ISIS, Boko Haram, Al-Qaeda. These are the new version. In the 70s, we had the 80s, we had also the Taliban. and continue to have that. There are different forms of exclusive sectarian interpretation introduced by different religious scholars, and they have credibilities funded and supported by government. Another challenge usually are introduced is that Islam is, this is internal belief that we are superior to all other faiths. You hear that from some teachers or from preachers. And also the fear that if you bring in education for peace about diversity, Christian, equality of women, inclusivity, you are modifying the religious identity. A challenge we always have to deal with it. And you have to handle that challenge as well. I'm bringing those pictures and photos from Quranic schools where we work and try to introduce Islamic education. And this was Chad, Niger, Cameroon, and so forth. No discussion is allowed about politics. You are not allowed to touch the core curriculum of how we teach the Quran or the Hadith. The teacher themselves have very limited training in theological debate. They have one doctrine in many ways, and any intervention has to have development and humanitarian relief, because the condition, as you see, even we had to install a new install roof above the heads of the students as a condition for us to introduce that concept. There is a huge misperception of this Quranic school and the religious school of Muslim as they being the source of terror and recruiting for violent extremism, which we discovered that, and also research have proven that this is inaccurate and really misperception. The framing that we use for Muslim peace education in this context, we are not going to change any curriculum. We're coming to talk about how can we better learn the faith, how can we pedagogically improve the ways which you can memorize the Quran, in which you can understand the Prophet sayings, and which you can live your life and apply it. How can we use the indigenous culture, ritual, story, poetry, culture, proverb into better understanding nonviolence, tolerance, human rights, and gender equality? We want to be able to have Islamic peace education to be relevant to the daily life of the students. Very hard to do that. We were in Chad in November or October, actually, end of October, early November. To do that when you have a military regime and your movement has to be escorted by the police. We involve policymakers, US ambassadors. We brought very high officials from the government in order to support the Quranic school teacher and to dismantle and challenge the perception that this is a source of terror, of violence and extremism. And the teacher who came from Chad, Cameroon to this seminar about 6 months ago were delighted just to have exchange views among each other and exchange how challenging it is for them to overcome the obstacle. We develop a contextual based methodology, not a Western, Northern Hemisphere imposed curriculum, but it's organically, we work with the teachers' methodology themselves, with the teacher ideologies, and we came to say, you are expert in Islam, and they were more expert than us in teaching Quran. And we said, how can we make it more mainstream, more integrated into your daily work? We really struggle in dealing with this expectation that we're coming to impose and antagonize the indigenous community. We address the fear of people being secularized. We said, we're not coming to make you secularized. We had to deal with the strategy and how to handle the Boko Haram pressure in that area. And we had to maintain the image and the credibility that these schools are not compromising the Islamic identity, because they are the gatekeeper for the Islamic identity. So we had to go through the mayor, the governor, and the sultan of that area. we did not introduce new values. Those values were within the school itself and within the system. And also we gave a priority to the teacher needs, no intervention in the core curriculum. They continue to teach the same text, which is the Quran and the Hadith. No one would change them. But what we allowed is really, what we allowed is the space for exploring them. That's the blessing of our intervention by the local authorities. I wanted to stop here and say a few words about the case study. Although the case study,
could I just pause you for a moment? We're getting close. We're at the end of the prepared presentation time. So are you able to wrap it up in one sentence, or will?
That's what I was intending to do.
Okay,
I was wanting to say, I used the African context as a class example, but it does illustrate similar challenges in many parts of the Muslim world, where we try to introduce peace education under similar circumstances using similar methodology of bottom up, inside out. And thank you for your patience, and apology for taking 5 minutes extra.
Not a problem. I'm sure people were absolutely fascinated with the stories that you were sharing and all the information that you were bringing to us. It really feels like maybe an uphill battle that you've been doing for the last 30 years. So we're very happy to learn about it. And I'm sure a lot of questions will come. So I won't take up, I thank you for your presentation. I won't take up any more time. We have about 10 minutes. We're going to just do a little bit of Q&A between the panelists, and then I'm going to throw the floor open to people who want to ask questions. If you would like to put your question in the chat in about 10 minutes, then I'll start going through the questions. In the meantime, let's just give a little chance for our panelists to have some questions that have been sort of on my mind as you've been speaking. And let me throw it back to Elder Bonnie. You were the one who spoke first, and you one of the things that you mentioned that I found really interesting was the way you said the greeting was, "Are you at peace?" when you meet with each other. And then you talked about the three foundations. And I'm wondering, I know that you sort of already did this, but can you just help bring our minds back, because we've had a lot of information since you spoke. When you say, "Are you at peace?" what does that sort of really mean to someone?
Well, literally, I guess today we take that as saying, how are things going? How are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's just, that is the greeting. That's the I guess the modern understanding of that. But when we say it in the language, the literal translation of what we're saying in the language is, "Are you at peace?"
Right. One of the things that I know about your role as a learning strategist at the University of Toronto, you talk about how you give workshops or you work with the students, and you use something called the medicine wheel of wellness. And you use that as a way for each individual to kind of check in with the different quadrants. So I was wondering if you could just share that with us as a way for us to do a little self-check about how's our wellness today.
Oh, yeah.
And how we relate that to peace.
I guess quickly, the medicine wheel itself is an Anishinaabe teaching tool. So that's kind of their symbolism. But in my work, I used it as, and it is one teaching of that is to try to maintain balance with the whole of the self. So as students, the four quadrants are the mental, the physical, the emotional, and the spiritual. That makes up the person's being. So as students on campus, that mental part of it is so overwhelming. And that's the all that's being concentrated on by, I guess, everything having to do with U of T, and the academic part of it is that emphasis that's on the mental part of it. But I guess with Indigenous students, I try to remind them that they're more than just the mental part. So, and everything has to be working, and all those other quadrants you have to pay attention to that. in order to, they also help balance out the mental part of it, where if we're attacked mentally, then what rises up in the feelings part of it and the emotional part of it then is stress. So, but I guess academically, stress is combined with that mental health issue part of it, but it's not really. It is separated into the emotional part of it. I start feeling stress and I fear that I'm going to fail, all of that. So that idea, so there's the physical part of it. So some of the remedies to offset that and help balance is to take a break, stand up every hour, you know, and that was kind of the advice over COVID. You know, remember to stand up, stretch, go for a walk, get yourself a drink. But that physical part of it, you need to have that part of it to do that. But try to get in, you know, even go outside and walk down to the end of your block or something. Some physical part of it helps you to take a break from that mental overload. And then there's the spiritual part of it. And spiritual doesn't necessarily just mean religion. Spiritual means what kind of relationship then, and especially for Indigenous peoples, remember that we have more strength to draw from than just our own selves. We're not just, you know, onto ourselves. We've got all of creation to talk to and those energies. And when you go outside, then you're getting all that positive energy from creation. That kind of, we may not know it, but we feel that spiritually. So that's the spiritual connect, is just about relationship. So that can be friends, family, going outside with just creation. So that in essence is the medicine wheel. So if we're taking time in our day or our week to be able to look at that checklist, what am I doing physically? That can take in our food. What am I doing spiritually? What kind of relationships do I have, or what am I giving time to? And then it's not all just the mental part of it. How am I handling my feelings? So yeah, and that in fact is the medicine wheel. So I try to remind the students of we're more than just mental part of it. Remind them that there's other parts to us.
Well, honestly, I think that's something that everyone needs. It's not just students.
Yeah. Yeah, it becomes, and some of the students, even the non-Indigenous students, have picked up on that and have used that periodically as a check-in. You know, every couple of months, actually sit down and write on the wheel, you know, what's happening to me. And I kind of equate that to, there's 4 quadrants. So if you're void in one quadrant and not doing something, that's almost like the 4 tires on your car. So if there's something wrong with one of your tires, your car isn't going to operate very well. So we have to make sure we're addressing all of that in some little way.
Right. And that kind of thing gives balance to the self.
Yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to throw it over to Fatima now. In your introduction, you said that you wanted to focus, you had decided, oh, was I going to tell stories or was I going to do the theory? And you ended up presenting us sort of like the thesis methodology and things. What was one of the stories that you wanted to share with us?
Yeah, I made a list of stories that I could possibly talk about. And I like the one that comes to my mind is one day, a friend of mine who was a co-worker at the school, she was also a hunter. Traditionally in that community, it's the men who hunt, but if the women choose to hunt, then they can. And this was what she had chosen to maintain a healthy lifestyle, exactly like what Elder Bonnie was talking about. And so we went ptarmigan hunting, and while we didn't get any ptarmigan, we saw 2 muskox on the way back. And the goal was the person who was with us, they wanted to hunt 1 muskox. And so just talking about taking only what you need. I think when we fired the shots, I mean, I wasn't holding the gun, I'm not allowed to hunt there. But when the people that I was hunting with, when they fired the shots, I think we waited, there were 2 muskox standing next to each other. And since we only needed 1, we waited for over an hour for the second muskox to get frightened and run away. But the way creation works, the second muskox did not leave. They did not leave the muskox that was injured. So in the end, we had to shoot both the muskox, but just the caution with which we decided whether or not we were going to shoot the second muskox, because we really only needed one, reminded me of the story of, I was taught by my teachers that when the Sahaba would, or when the companions would go to the market, they would, when their needs were met, they would leave the market. They would not stay in the market. And so that was a story that had come to my mind about traditionally societies only taking what it is that they need, so that they can leave the rest for the rest of the creation, or so on. Yes.
Right. So different from the consumer culture, which says the cure to 9/11 is to go out and start shopping. I'd like to then throw the last question over to Dr. Abu-Nimer. There's just so much in what you said. It's hard for me to know what to pull out, but I wanted to ask you, you said that one of the things that you try to do, apart from not disrupting, sort of like when you go out into the projects, to try not to disrupt the core curriculum, and you want to make sure that the people don't feel threatened. You want to make sure that you're coming to enhance or show them that you've got something to add to what they're doing. And you said you want to make it seem relevant to their daily lives. And I was wondering if you had an example of how you actually do that and how other people were responding, because it could be a really abstract thing, this idea of Islamic peace education.
Yeah, thank you. I also mentioned that it felt as an uphill. It's not, it's challenging, but it's very promising. It's very hopeful. And there is so many satisfying moments and things that you can see the work with the teacher. It's relevant because it means that you're going to reduce the degree of corporal punishment for students while you teach. It means that the children, when they recite the Fatiha in the Quran, they understand the meaning of it through a story from their culture, from their daily life. It is meaningful and practical, because to teach peace, you have to do role play and simulation, and you have to play your enemy's role. To understand gender equality, you have to speak about, understand the gender roles in your society, what's your wife and what's your sister are doing, and you as a male, you are not doing, and how is that responsibility? So we go into this practical discussion through the space that we create between the teacher and the students, among the teachers themselves. So you emerge with a better understanding, what we call in education internalizing those values. They hear them every week. We hear them. If you go to the mosque every Friday, that's what you hear. The challenge is not in the values and hearing them. The challenge, and this is not only for Muslim, for a human, the challenge is for internalizing those values and walking the talk. And that's the gap we try to close with the peace education. Today, politicians speak about peace. One of the most brutal politicians who commits, genocides and massive wars use terminology of peace and negotiation and, protecting lifestyle. Anyway, so I find these are things very relevant to their life, of the teachers, of the students. And we Muslims in general in the world today, whether it is in Canada, in the US, France, or in UK, or anywhere, adopting peaceful education frameworks is in my view, it's the highest form of jihad a Muslim can do during these days, because it's service to the both ummah and to the humanity, to educate for peace when the entire world is caught weaponization, and in nuclear. I don't want to go into these areas, but that's the best we could do. Thank you.
I want to ask you a follow-up. Well, and this might even sound like a bit of a dumb question, but we know that from the late 70s, early 80s on, Muslim theorists and social activists developed a language which took many people down the path towards violence. And we saw different, terrorist groups, and they would splinter off. And then the whole problem with Algeria, fighting with each other and fighting the government. And then, excuse me, you mentioned them in your lecture, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram, and that. Your expertise has been on Islamic peace education, but do you have an insight in how things went so wrong? How did the other voice become so dominant?
Well, in 30 seconds, it does. I'm not sure the 70s is where we start, and even some people try to start with the colonial 1800. But I think one can go back to the first century of Islam, when there were attempts and began sort of roots to prevent ijtihad, to prevent people from better understanding the message of Islam and better understanding the message of the Prophet, peace be upon him. It goes to that root, when the politicization of the religious identity, or what we call today politics of religious identity. You can go back to these roots that in many ways brought so much violence and so much fights within Islamic communities during that time. The difference that there were majority dominant governments, and they allowed also civilization to grow. They were allowing science, they were allowing education to take place. Unfortunately, that space was destroyed with the colonial structure, and also prior to the colonial structure with certain form of governance that the Muslim world had seen in the past 400-500 years, in that sense. But in modern history, we continue to face the same challenge in, as I said, the 57 Muslim countries. The issue of citizenship, the notion that one cannot feel protected as a citizen with the rights and the duties. There is no space for that. And as long as we continue to live in a context where citizenship is not protected, respected, is not enforced, institution will not be respected, rule of law will not be implemented. So we will continue to live in many ways in a survival mode. And these days, it's, we've seen the consequences of that. We've seen the devastation. I want to finish with this. We should mention that we've seen the devastation of the earthquake in Syria and Turkey, and how that was, even such a disaster was politically manipulated and resulted in such loss of a human life. And that's due to the, again, collapse of the central government authority to establish proper citizenship and protect its people.
Well, that was maybe a bit unfair of me to ask you such a big question, but thank you for being a good sport and playing along and giving us an answer that I think really cut to the core. Thank you for that. It's time for me to throw it open to the floor. And if anyone has a question that they want to type in the chat, please feel free, and please feel free. If somebody doesn't feel like doing all that typing and would like to ask the question directly, I can allow that under certain conditions. And one of them is that I don't want any comments. I only want questions that are directed to the panelists. So if you want to speak and raise your hand to ask a question, please do. Or if you want to type it into the chat, please do. Do I have access? Can I see the chat? While we wait, for people to chat or put their hands, I can keep asking my questions. I can take advantage and keep asking questions. One of the things, Bonnie, that you had said that made, oh, there is a question. Let me see. Sean.
No, I can wait. I can wait.
No, go ahead. I've been talking a lot. Go ahead.
I actually was just curious, Fatima, with your research, how did language come into play? Because of course, these notions of peace, so embedded in the framework that is language. And did you learn Inuktitut or the local dialect? How did that look?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And that was actually one of the biggest challenges conducting the research that I did, and which is delaying the thesis, is that language barrier. For example, when you're just having a conversation with people in the community and they're not self-conscious about the content that they're sharing, they will in daily life, they will share some stories or some statements that really cut to the core of what they perceive peace to be. So for example, one of the elders that I interviewed, and the reason I interviewed her was because of stories like this. One day she was just sitting and she said, I used to get very angry at the geese that they were eating all the blueberries. Then one day I realized, I can go to the store and I can get food, but these geese can't go to the store. And so I should learn to share with them. And she was sharing the story about coming to this realization that she can't be angry at the geese for taking away the blueberries that she so deeply cherishes to pick. But the same elder, when I interviewed, and one of the interview questions was, what is one word, if you had to explain what peace is, what is one word that you would use? The answer was very succinct, and it didn't examine the depth of what I had observed on a daily basis. So for instance, the same elder said, well, peace is believing in Jesus Christ, or peace is forgiveness. And then that sort of ended the conversation. So the language barrier was definitely something that I struggled with, and that's something that I think, had I not stayed for the 2 years, and the longer I stayed, I would have learned more about how they understood peace and how they understood harmonious coexistence. But you're absolutely right. Like, even that word peace is the stories that they share. Peace is sharing. Peace is, when you have fish, going and sharing the fish with somebody else, maybe an elder who can't fish for themselves, maybe somebody who has a disability, or somebody who can't leave a house, or a single mom. But those ideas did not come out in the written interviews. So it was definitely a challenge. Yes.
Thank you, Fatima. There's a question for Bonnie. You talked about the law. What was it called? The Great Law of Peace for the Haudenosaunee, and how there had been this 2,000-year prehistory, and the values of peace, having strength, and a good mind. This is like a whole system. And as you were talking, I was just able to experience the devastating impact that colonialism and the imposition of like the Canadian governance structure must have had. And you said that there are people today who still try to practice these aspects of the three foundations. I was just wondering, because Muslims, as Dr. Abu-Nimer said, experienced similar invasion, colonization, and structural imposition, and it's been devastating in the Muslim world for the last 100-odd years. We still haven't recovered from it. So I'm just wondering how you see your community having kept those, or how has it recovered or not recovered? Like, can you just say a bit more about that?
I guess I can say it is surviving, but it is surviving from the impacts of colonization and our world just being blown apart because of that. A lot of our elders, and when they I guess our kids were taken away to residential schools. The families were broken up, but those traditions and languages and ways of doing things, the belief system was still intact in the community for, you know, right up until I would tend to say the, you know, 19th century. But it really had been impacted and destroyed to a great degree by residential schooling. Just that separation from the lack of the intergenerational transmission of knowledge and language and ways of doing, and our stories. Our stories were for the young people to hear growing up. I would tend to say that even with those impacts, traditionally speaking, a lot of our ceremonies and ways of doing things kind of went underground. So it was all of these things were practiced in secret. And remember, there were 6 nations of Haudenosaunee people that were impacted. So there's pockets, even today, there's pockets of traditional peoples within all of the communities. And at the same time, the government has instituted or planted more or less their own what's called a band council elective system in our communities as well. So there's the traditional community and the elected community, which is kind of like the arm of the Canadian government, is actually sitting in our communities, and there are our own people that are doing that job. Listening to the policies and delivering the dictates of the government to the community people. So that is still all going on. But in some communities, there's a really antagonizing fight between the traditional peoples and the government people, more or less. And they're all our own people. But they still have, even with that, they still have that understanding about the traditional peoples. And in other communities, it's kind of like a pendulum. It swings to the real controversial communities. But there's other communities that actually live more or less, I wouldn't say separate, but in peace with each other. You know, it's not that they won't speak up when they disagree with something, but I would say as of maybe as late as, I would say, the 1960s was when there was a revitalization and a movement, because by the end of the 1960s, all the residential schools in Canada were closed by 1969. So another generation of people were then growing up in the community. So at that same time, there was a whole burst of language and culture revitalization going on. People couldn't get enough of listening to the stories or listening to the song and dance. We were then allowed to wear our traditional dress. All of that was all outlawed. But in the 60s, people were gathering and talking about this stuff. So there was a resurgence of language and culture right from the 60s right till today.
All right, thank you. I'm sorry, I'm just looking at the clock. I've got a question for Fatima coming. So, yeah. Fatima, you spoke about the similarities between Muslim and Indigenous beliefs. My question is, to what extent do these have conflict or differences?
I'll be very honest. I haven't, number one, I don't think, and I know I specifically said Indigenous versus Islamic, but there are scholars who categorize Islamic beliefs as Indigenous beliefs. So it's not a clear binary between the two. And number two, what I've read of dispute resolution within Indigenous traditions, not just within Canada, but overseas, like internationally as well, is that I haven't so far come across a conflict. And I think what I'm trying to get at with this thesis is this idea that traditional communities, by virtue of being traditional and by virtue of being in touch with in touch with sort of the inspirations of the soul or the heavenly inspirations, that there's great similarities in how we address conflict resolution and dispute resolution. So I can't, just thinking off the top of my head, I can't think of a situation where there was a great conflict. You know, like when I was new to Canada, people would say, well, there's a huge conflict between Indigenous spirituality and Islamic spirituality because of the belief in creation stories, or because of the belief in the power of the ancestral spirits. But the more we study Islamic tradition, the more we realize that there's a lot of content about these things as well. You know, this idea that animals can be transformed from one creation, from one form to the other. We know God has done that. We know that if we study Sufism, that inspirations of the soul is there's an entire area of content on that. So I would say that there is more harmony, and I can't think of a conflict between the two worldviews.
Thank you, Fatima. I have two questions left, and then we'll turn it over for closing remarks. One to Dr. Abu-Nimer and one more to Fatima. Dr. Abu-Nimer, in your presentation, you mentioned that Fatima's research is quite pioneering, trying to compare Muslim and Indigenous studies. And I was wondering if you could reflect on what you see as pioneering in that, and where you've been working in this field for 30 years. So where do you see it moving in the next 30 years or 10 or whatever year you want to choose? We can't hear you.
Thank you. Thank you for that provocative question as well. I mean, there's 2 points I want to make here. One point, it is pioneer because I think the fact that Muslim communities, whether they are in the South or in the North Hemisphere, share the burden of being in many ways dominated or in a structure of violence like Indigenous people. Being in that relationship or in that similar space of victim of colonization, even when we live in Canada or the US, you still face the threat of being, profiled, Islamophobia all around you, issues of reunion with your family, issues of employment, issues of gender roles, and many areas relate to your practicing your religious identity or faith identity. It's not compared or equal. I'm not trying to make it equal to what Indigenous people, Native American here in the US or in Canada went through. At the end of the day, we are immigrants who came to a land as well, and we're trying to be respectful of the Indigenous people who own the land and who are the original victim of the colonial settler project initially. So ourselves are a privilege. However, within that privilege, it's relative to the dominant majority. My point here, the study can be a bridge for solidarity and for building alliances between Muslims and Indigenous people on many issues of discrimination, exclusion, about education. I don't know about you, but I know in the US where I live now, and I have 2 children, that they did not get any form of peace education in the school, that any connotation with Islam or even religion. Our school system are closed to religion or to any form of faith, especially for Islam. On the contrary, for Muslim, they have to fight against the Islamophobic content of the former curriculum in the state of Virginia where I live. And there are many manifestations of these. So we share that in many ways, stereotyping and the profiling and discrimination within the curriculum system. That is where the pioneer research, if it can produce more commonalities, more common concerns, more common problems in trying to teach our children in public school. Where did you teach your children? If you want to teach them Islamic peace education, what are your options in Washinton, where I am? Public school, you're not allowed to bring religion. Public school, you're not allowed to bring Islam. Public schools have curriculum. In many ways, the entire Muslim civilization is summarized in 1 page or 2 pages. I mean, these are the same thing that many of the Asian, Muslim, Black, Latino, and Native American and natives, indigenous people face. And I think the more exploration of the commonality that we can do with each other, tradition, culture, spirituality, the better possibility we can build coalitions, alliances to advocate for, again, I'm back into the same concept, to be equal citizen in this area. The problem of citizenship is not only in Muslim countries. We also here in the US, and then I worked 7 years in European country, in Austria as well, and saw the same situation of we struggling to get equal citizenship and equal opportunity in a secular system where religion, we're supposed to put it in the faith identity, whether it is symbolic or whether it is substance. We're supposed to put it in the closet, and at night or when we go home, open the closet and practice it. And then when we go out, we should lock it back, and there is no space for it.
Thank you. If anyone wants to support the work that Dr. Abu-Nimer is doing, he has an institute called the Salam Institute. If you'd like to put that in the chat, maybe someone wants to make a donation to support your work and your institute's work. Fatima, I have one question for you, and we're almost out of time, so can you please give like a 1-minute answer, if possible, although it's a very big question. What was the most moving lesson or teaching that you learned during your research?
I think the biggest lesson, and I think about this, was my young students, because I was working as a teacher up north. My 11-year-old students during conversational English, they have 2 interests. They want to know about your romantic life, and they want to know if you fought with somebody. And I said I had fought with somebody, and they asked me more about, they interrogated more, and they eventually just said, well, why do you fight back? And that's something that I've really, that's a statement that keeps coming back to me. Why do I fight back? And an 11-year-old taught me that. So that's the biggest lesson. It wasn't part of a formal interview process, but that's the biggest lesson I think of on a regular basis.
Well, I think if we all had the strength of mind not to fight back when we have that emotional reaction, I think the world would be a more peaceful place. That's the end of my role as moderator. I would now like to thank everyone who has spoken today, the people who asked questions, the panelists. I personally feel that I have learned and been transformed, and I'm very honored to be part of your learning. I'm very honored to be part of this journey with you tonight. So I thank you very much for all the time you put in preparing your presentations and joining us tonight, making the presentation, and then going through being a good sport with me with my questions. Now I would like to turn it over to Dr. Naveen Redha, who is the Associate Professor of Muslim Studies at Emmanuel College in the Victoria University at the University of Toronto. Very complicated relationship there. I never get it quite right. Dr. Naveen is the driving force behind the establishment of Muslim Studies at Emmanuel, and a great colleague, always listen to me and be a partner in these pioneering stories like the Muslim Indigenous relationship building. As ever, thank you, Dr. Naveen. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Kathy, for your wonderful moderation of this panel, and also for so greatly enriching our intellectual and lives and so many ways at Emmanuel College, not only by organizing this particular series of panels, but also so many other activities. Thank you, Yanhu Don Goose, Bonnie Jane Maracle, for teaching us something about Haudenosaunee, pioneering contributions in the area of peace education and peace between nations with their distinctive, confederacy and constitution, and also by educating people to become good people and with good minds and peaceful ways of life. I think these are something that certainly so many of us have learned from, and we also see them enacted in later political entities like, Canada and certainly in North America. Thank you so much for sharing this part of Haudenosaunee history with us. When you said the Mohawk greeting of "Are you at peace?" It brought to mind the Arabic word for peace, which is salam, which is part of our greeting, assalamu alaikum. And the Arabic word for peace actually means a little bit more than peace in Arabic. It also means wholeness and well-being and safety. And I was wondering, in the translation from Mohawk to English, whether some of the meanings in the Mohawk word for peace also get lost in translation or not, whether we actually have something a little bit more in that greeting, that beautiful greeting that you shared with us. Thank you, Fatima Ahmed, for your pioneering thesis, and that has made possible this event tonight and inspired us in so many ways, and for sharing us some of these beautiful stories that you came across among Indigenous peoples in the North here in Canada. And thank you also, Professor Abu-Nimer, for your work is so well known when it comes to peace education and also interreligious education and conflict resolution. And I can see why after your presentation, which I also learned so much from. One of the things that Indigenous and Muslims, peoples and Muslims share is being at the receiving end of colonialism for so many years, and also depictions of us being, savage and violent, and in order to, justify colonialism and acts of violence committed against us in different ways. So thank you for your contribution, Fatima, for making possible these connections and sharing and understanding our commonalities and highlighting the importance of learning from each other and learning about some of these histories and how to alleviate some of these injustices moving forward. I'd also like to thank our sponsors, Olive Tree Foundations, which has sponsored us every single year, and Naim Siddiqui and Munib Nasir, and the important work you're doing with Olive Tree Foundation. And I'd also like to thank Justice for All, which has also sponsored us this year and last year, and Tahagayur. Thank you for the important work that you do in pointing out the injustices that happen and in trying to bring justice for all Indigenous peoples. I'd also like to thank our principal, Reverend Dr. Hiran King Cragg, for her beautiful explanation of the Emmanuel College mission and the work that we do here of equipping leaders to be more deeply rooted in their religious traditions while engaging the religious and spiritual traditions of others. So thank you for that. I'd also like to thank Professor Jonathan Happleton Diabo, who teaches Indigenous theologies at Emmanuel, for his role in organizing this event together with Kathy. But he couldn't be with us tonight, but he certainly helped contribute greatly to this panel. And also to Sean Houston for his great support and, always in every single year in which we've held a series of events. I'd also like to thank all of you everyone here for coming. And I hope you enjoyed tonight and that we'll see you again sometime. And I'd like to end with my favorite greeting. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum.